you have to think about how do you reconfigure, how do you adapt your networks? All trucking companies, the one thing that's common is we all use trucks. After that, how we go about serving the customer, how we go about operating the network, where things go, how they flow. So network design and engineering of a transportation network is going to be different. You have to rethink about how you're going to be able to apply the technology with its phase one early implementation limitations. So you have to think about that, and that is not something that happens quickly.
Welcome to Trucking Forward with Tim and Adam, where two former engineers sit in a very small room and awkwardly talk about all things trucking and autonomy. And
it's pretty fair. It's a good thing you can't smell podcast.
That's true. You can't smell podcasts. Today we've got a very venerable, honorable, amazing guest with us, Walter Grigg, the Senior Executive Vice President of something or other at Torc. Walter, what exactly is your title?
Well, it's none of the ones you listed. I've had the wonderful opportunity of wearing a couple hats here at Torc. But as of today, my primary responsibility, accountability, is leading up our industry side partnerships. So when we say industry side, talking about the trucking industry, those that are ultimately interested in the work that your teams do.
Awesome. So you're like our business relations development trucking guru.
I like to think of myself as the one who helps communicate between the two sides. I'm afraid if I go down that path too far, I end up like Milton or whatever his name was in Office Space. I take the requirements from the engineers. But it's a really enjoyable role. It really is. I get to work directly in between some of the most brilliant technical people on your teams and the industry, which I've enjoyed to call my career for about 15 years. The trucking industry, that is, and be the go-between, be the interface between both sides.
So what does a go-between look like? So you work with trucking industry representatives and partners, and you collect feedback. Do you collect requirements? Are you trying to understand what the environment looks like, the economic environment, or the trucking industry as a whole? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of all the above. So a lot of your leading players in the trucking industry, ultimately, that will be on the demand side of this product, one, are interested to stay connected and caught up on what's the progress on the development, what's happening, call it in the regulatory space, what's happening in terms of timelines. The other side of it is, what do they need to be thinking about, right? So this product comes to market, call it whatever day one is. It's not like that can be the first day that the trucking industry starts thinking about autonomy. So they have to understand how they're going to configure their networks. They have to understand how they're going to configure their maintenance environment, their maintenance efforts, what the future state, in our world, the product world, personas, right? Who are the folks that are going to be interacting with the tools and the products? What are they going to be? What's going to be different? The other side is, in some regard, yeah, I do help to the other direction. So I give them all those updates. I stay up to speed with our organization and our partner organization, Daimler, on what those topics are. And then the other direction, kind of the reverse direction, from industry side back to our organization, help to translate some of what the problems are, what the challenges are, translate as to how it relates to us, and call them the beginnings of product requirements that come back, not in a very technical sense, but more in a much broader economic and operational sense. And then the other side of it is helping our organization understand the trucking industry as a whole. So we have buildings and buildings full of some brilliant technical folks, engineers, developers. But how do we take that knowledge base? How do we take that ability and turn it into a product that the industry ultimately needs? So I keep up very closely, which I have for most of my grown up career. Keep up very closely with what are the dynamics of the trucking industry, what's going on within it, what does it mean to us, and then strategically. So I specifically work under our corporate strategy group. What does it mean for us strategically in terms of timing? The trucking industry has cycles as it goes up and down. What does that mean to us? What does it mean to our product timing? What does it mean to call it the capital markets? What does it mean to the broader world and the hype cycle of autonomy? So I get to wear a lot of different hats and do a lot of different things. So hopefully that was at least a minor summary.
So go ahead.
No, what do you got? I was going to dive in.
I was going to dive in a little bit. I want to hear a little bit more about the cycles that you were talking about and what they are. But I did hear something implied in there that I want to pick a bone with a little bit, because I feel like you were implying, just maybe you didn't intend to, but just a small little amount, that like engineers left to their own devices wouldn't produce a product that anybody would want.
I'll say it ain't so, Walter.
No, not that. Because I appreciate your teams come up with some incredible stuff. It's really a story. It's kind of that. It's using business sound bites and right. It's that time to value concept, right? It would definitely be usable. It would definitely be valuable. But how do you minimize time, maximize value? How do you translate the very specific kind of time to market needs? That's really kind of what that intercommunication is.
So actually, before we go to cycles, it's kind of diving in on another question I had. We talked a little bit about the challenges on either side, right? Engineers are not seeing necessarily where the real value adds. On the other side, the industry is facing a lot of challenges of how to integrate it. It's a little bit of a nebulous spot for me. Like, what are the big challenges for the industry partners? Like, where is their biggest mental shift or their biggest operational shift coming from?
Yeah. So it's a couple places. So first is the ability to integrate the tech, the tool itself into their business, right? So, I mean, a lot of people on the outside don't really understand how utterly complicated, maybe not overly hard, but utterly complicated the trucking industry is. There are systems upon systems upon systems used to make the industry as efficient as it can be today. Transportation management systems, asset management systems, telematics, billing, you name it, right? ERPs of all sorts. So how do all of those integrate to where we have a product that is easy to use to the extent that it's valuable, right? If it's this incredibly capable technology, but that human machine business interface is really, really complicated, that's difficult. And this is not a quick or easy lift for the trucking industry. The ability to fit this thing in to where it works as seamlessly as possible and has de minimis disruption, if at all possible, that's a real, very difficult one. The other is ultimately the technology is going to roll out with inherent limitations. It's not going to be the everything that does everything, right? So you have to think about how do you adapt your networks? All trucking companies, the one thing that's common is we all use trucks. After that, how we go about serving the customer, how we go about operating the network, where things go, how they flow. So network design and engineering of a transportation network is going to be different. You have to rethink about how you're going to be able to apply the technology with its, phase one, early implementation limitations. So you have to think about that, and that is not something that happens quickly. To reconfigure a transportation network, that's a complex thing. So those are some of the call it the major ones, which is why we're so focused on an integrated development, partnering with the potential customers, partnering with the industry. They need to get started now. We know we have a time horizon, your teams, on getting the technology to an inherently safe, commercially scalable, economically valuable, economically valid product, which is going to take a while. It's going to take that long, maybe longer, for the trucking industry to also be able to integrate it and adapt it and adapt their models to be able to utilize it effectively and efficiently, such that all three of those come true.
Interesting. Well, can you, I guess, diving back into what we were talking about earlier, like, how does that play together with the cycles that you were talking about in the freight industry?
Yeah. So we're experiencing one now. So the trucking industry, the freight cycle, which is really part and parcel of the economic cycle, right? So you've got expansion and retraction at the kind of the macro econ 101, right? The economy expands, economy retracts, so on and so forth. And the trucking industry follows suit. Remember, the trucking industry is this massive industry, millions of trucks that are moving around in any given day, kind of the lifeblood of the U.S. economy. So as of today, as the recording of this, the trucking industry is in a retreat. It's on the downside of a freight cycle. So that is, you're seeing reduced, relatively speaking, to the last upcycle, the last top end of the upcycle. You're seeing reduced demand for transportation. Where is that coming from? In the current environment, ultimately it's reduced consumption by the American economy, the consumer. What is that driven by? There's all kinds of things going on, right? You've got our Fed working to control inflation and the mechanisms they use to do that. Necessarily squat the economy down or try to bring it under control. You've got this ever-changing geopolitical landscape, and that's a whole other discussion that's kind of changing the flows of freight and how all that happens. But we are basically on the downslope of a freight cycle. So with that, what you see are reduced demand for trucking today. It's a relative value. You see reduced demand for trucking today.
Relative to what, Walter?
The top end of a cycle. So let's say look back as of today's recording. Look back 9, 12, 15 months ago. There was a massive capacity crunch, right? So when we were in the kind of the post-COVID and COVID recovery, or however you want to label that epic in history, right? Whatever caused it, whether it was the insertion of capital or just consumer behavior, doesn't really matter. The trucking industry was in gross demand. You couldn't get enough capacity. That drove rate increases. That drove massive hiring cycles. That drove ultimately inflation of transportation costs. So relative to that period in the economic cycle and the freight cycle, we're on a down cycle. Which will ultimately recover. So when you're in a down cycle, naturally you see reduced demand for freight. So therefore, let's call it the public markets, the capital markets, sees an economic retraction. They see a retraction in the industry. And therefore, it's not as exciting of an investment opportunity, right? You're going to try to invest in the things that are pointed upwards. But somehow or another, being in the industry for long enough, it's always befuddled me how the public and the capital markets don't realize that there's always going to be an up to a down. There's going to be an up cycle. When we talk about when this down cycle recovers, it always does. It will, and it always does. When it recovers, there's going to be another surge. There's going to be another surge in demand for trucking, another surge in demand for capacity. How that gets fulfilled is going to be shaped a little differently, as it always has been, by the last upcycle. For example, we know that the ultimate demographics of the labor force, the U.S. economic labor force, we can talk about driver shortage and whether it's relative or where it comes from, or it doesn't really matter where it comes from. It's the fundamental demographics of the U.S. labor force are going to be even more stressed and strained at the upcycle and top end of that next cycle. You're gonna have to have solutions and technologies that help to ease that burden, or else we find ourselves in a situation like we were 12, 15, 18 months ago. And when you get those increases in the freight cycle, you get the increased demand, you start to see a surge in transportation costs. Ultimately, there is opportunity for investment, and then you see the capital markets and the public markets point that way again. So where we saw a huge interest in autonomy and the solutions it could provide, and then lo and behold, all that kind of evaporated and went away. Well, it follows the public market's interest. We are now on the bottom of the AV cycle, which is a indirect, a 1-to-1 correlation to the freight cycle, and the AV cycle is going to come back as well, indirect correlation to the next upcycle. But it will be informed a little bit differently as a function of the available labor demographic, the ability of people to actually do this work and job. And then there will be another cycle and another and another. And when you play the really long term, the really macros on top of these, relatively speaking, shorter cycles, which are measured in years typically, what you see is the demand for solutions to provide capacity continue to grow. And that kind of then speaks to and is a natural segue into what else is going on in the U.S. economy and the transportation industry that puts even more pressure on the freight cycle, puts even more pressure on the trucking industry.
So a little fascinating for me. You talked a little bit about kind of the geopolitical environment. How does that impact it? That's hard to see for me right now.
Yeah, so that's actually that's where I was kind of leading to with my comment.
What? You were leading us on?
It's good.
And then less work for us. Calm down.
I was going somewhere with that. I'm telling you. No. Okay. So even broader, right? So everything I just framed was kind of the U.S. economic cycle, and we know that we're major part and parcel to the global economy and the whole play on globalization and whatnot, and we're all interconnected. Well, that's actually unraveling some, right? So in global kind of geopolitics, globalization itself is on the down cycle. Globalization was really began its upcycle post World War II and has really been on that trajectory ever since in terms of being able to interconnect resources, interconnect markets that was supported ultimately by the U.S. Well, that's starting to unravel now for all kinds of different reasons, right? We see what's happening over in kind of Eastern Europe. And then just kind of the nature of the relationship with the Asian manufacturing markets are changing. So what that means is a lot of manufacturing, it's a de-risk some of those more sensitive geopolitics to de-risk that. You're seeing a lot of manufacturing pointed back to the Western Hemisphere, pointed back to Mexico has an incredible opportunity. So you're seeing it kind of near shoring, or I think I've heard somebody call it fringe shoring. You've got onshoring, you're bringing that back. Well, with those changing geopolitics, what you end up with is putting even more increased demand ultimately on the U.S. trucking industry, the ability to move materials around, the ability to move goods around. But it's not a one for one, right? If you bring one widget back that is produced overseas and comes in through a marine port of LA, has been a massive marine terminal for the U.S. economy for a long time. Not to mention, they're everywhere, right? You've got Savannah, Jacksonville, Baltimore, down in the Gulf, they're everywhere, right? But Port of LA in Ontario was a big one. Well, when you bring one, call it widget back, one good back, it's not a one for one. It's not one good equals one truckload. If you're manufacturing that near shore, onshore, you now have to think about the movement of the raw good, of the commodity itself, the ore out of the ground. You got to move it around. Well, we have a great rail network designed specifically for that. You'll see increased activity there. But then you get into, you process that ore into, an input source. Well, that typically finds its way moving around between rail and trucking. You then go to a semi-finished good, to a finished good, to a finished good to distribution to retail. So bringing one thing back, unit of good back, isn't a one for one increase in trucking demand. It's somewhere on the order of a 3 to 5 to 1. And all modes of transportation are gonna rise in this tide, and trucking is one of them. So simply changing geopolitics will actually, through the means of nearshoring, onshoring, friendshoring, whatever we're gonna call it, will put an even larger demand volumetrically, totally independent of the demographic problem that we talked about before as well.
The three of us on this podcast right now probably wholeheartedly believe this, and I would imagine most people that are listening to the podcast kind of believe that AV technology will become pretty standard over the next decade and will become much more widely available. All of these changing geopolitics, these freight cycles, and supply and demand cycles, how do you see that kind of affecting the time horizon of when self-driving trucks would actually come to market, or when they'd be most valuable to come to market?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So there's opportunities to intercept, intercept that dropping business sound bites, intercept time to value, right? So we all fully understand autonomous vehicles at scale, inherently safe, commercially scalable, economically viable, are still a ways out, measured in years, right? We'll see across the industry, and there's great other players in the industry that are doing really, really good work. And very proud to consider them kind of colleagues in industry. You'll see driver out in small scale. I think we all agree with that. But to get to that large scale, if you work it right and you time it just right, and you work very hard on your schedules, you watch the economic cycles to intercept an emerging capacity crunch with the application of this technology, whether it be the next upcycle or the one after that. We've kind of made clear the narrative that the demand's going to be there. So that's where the opportunity is. But then there's the other discussion of the rate of scaling. How fast can we scale the production, manufacture, fielding, integration, application of the technology? That's got to be considered. That's where we bring in our industry partners. That's where we bring in the trucking industry so they can start to think about that as well. A lot of the big players in the industry, they're very, very astute and very informed and make decisions and take actions as a function of timing the cycles as well. Whether they are up hiring, whether they're retracting, whether they're capitalizing their fleet, whether they are dispositioning their fleet, it's non-trivial how they plan for this.
Well, I think, and sorry, Adam, I'll let you get in here and ask a question.
Go for
just a second. So something I want to clarify there. So I think in definitely in this industry, but I think just in the software engineering and software as a service industry as a whole, scale means different things to pretty much everybody you talk to. So when you say like scaling and at scale and when it scales, what do you mean?
Thousands and thousands and thousands of trucks.
But not millions and millions.
No possible way. So, total U.S. trucking industry, it's so big, it's hard to get really accurate numbers. But somewhere on the order of 4 or so million registered Class 8 vehicles, somewhere on the order of 3 or so million CDL drivers. It's really hard to understand exactly how they get applied and how they get used. So let's say there's anywhere between 3 or so million trucks running every single day. For the remaining time of our careers and probably lifetime, that number will be the number of autonomous vehicles that will ultimately have the best fit will come nowhere close to that number. So even if the ability to produce thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, it will still be a very, very small number in the grand scheme of all trucks. So when we talk about the nature of the increased freight demand, we talk about the nature of just the overall U.S. labor demographic and what's available. Our goal is to help to positively contribute to what will be continued immense pressure on the trucking industry, but as a percentage of the whole trucking industry, still a relatively small percentage.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm curious from your perspective, what drives that cap? Like, why are we saying it's a relatively small percentage? Like, what's your thought process there?
Yeah, just, kind of back to one of the earlier comments I made that, the only thing we all have in common in the trucking industry is we use trucks. How we go about servicing the customer, the distances that we travel, the types of goods and services provided through the use of trucks. So, the gross majority of all freight today is moving at 400 miles or so or less. It's local and regional movements, which really is going to be difficult to bring value to with autonomy. So it's really going to be your longer distances. That's even a relative. I threw in the in there. That's even relative, just as a function of the economics of what your cost inputs are on any given lane or any given here to there, A to B kind of cost components. So the overwhelming majority, and we don't really see that changing because that's going to be a function of where your manufacturing centers are, where your distribution centers are, where your demand centers are. That's not going to change quickly. For that to change, you'd have to be talking about manufacturing industries and in these millions of locations in the United States that manufacture and distribute. You'd have to be talking about them completely changing their distribution networks and their rooftops, and it's capital discussions that happen on 20 and 30-year cycles. And so the trucking industry is so large and so much in motion. Numbers get really difficult to really wrap your head around. A very small percentage is still a lot of trucks by
That's
quantity.
what I was going to comment on that, because you're really talking about like a slice of a slice of a slice, and then you're saying, yeah, but that's still billions.
A pile.
That's still billions.
Really big.
Of dollars, like tens of billions of dollars, and so that's surprising to me, because I don't think. I mean, I know these as facts with my job, but I don't know that I conceptualize them fully, of just kind of how big the U.S. trucking industry is. It's massive.
It's Titanic. Quite arguably the single largest operational industry segment in the United States. Most of the states that you look at, what's the number one job? It's truck driver. And that's not going to change. To be really clear, when we talk about the application of autonomy, the time to scale, what's the addressable market? Where can this be? So yeah, like when you get into the concept of trillions and billions, and the numbers are really hard to get your head around to actually paint a picture of. So the U.S. trucking industry is somewhere in terms of revenue under management around $1 trillion. Why not? Let's round up. 850 billion, depending upon who you ask. If you're dealing with, 4 million licensed Class 8 tractors, somewhere on the order of 3 million of them perhaps in operation any given day, a couple 100,000, that's a lot of trucks. If you're standing beside them, right? If you're standing in a parking lot full of a couple 100,000 trucks, that's a whole lot. But when you look at them distributed across the U.S. interstate network, across the secondary road network, running local operations, regional operations, and all the different modes between long haul, van, flatbed, the special commodities, tanker, agriculture. It's unbelievable how big it is. So a lot of autonomous trucks doesn't really necessarily mean a large gross percentage of the entire U.S. trucking network.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I learned something. Like, I know the facts, but I still learned something. That's awesome.
It's kind of the goal. That's why I agreed with Jason and Kylie to do this, is talk to people and occasionally learn something new.
Oh, the other, you asked me kind of what my title was or whatnot. I'm actually self-proclaimed Chief Zealot. So I got my start, I came to Torc from the transportation industry, from the trucking side. I started my career supporting a private fleet and then moved into a for-hire fleet and learned so much, right? I'm still enamored by the entire industry. So jokingly, I call myself Chief Zealot because one of my early opportunities to work with Torc while I was still over on the for-hire side was I saw this technology at its infancy, literally behind the steering wheel of one of the very first developmental trucks sitting across from Adam.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I saw it from its infancy, and I understood the challenges the industry faces. Every day in trucking is a tough day. It's a very, very difficult industry to do well at, to succeed. And I saw the truck drive itself and understood how early in infancy the technology was. And from the opportunity to help Adam there that day, I had about an hour drive home down Interstate 81. So I had a lot of windshield time to think about it, and I got cold chills. I remember thinking, oh my, this is going to work. And I see where the application is. I get it. And no, it's not going to be this every truck, and not in our lifetime, and probably not in our grandchildren's lifetime. It's not a problem to be thought about today in terms of trajectory. But in terms of what can it help with, what can it do, I got cold chills that day. And from that day forward, I've literally been Chief Zealot of what your teams do.
That's pretty fair. I can double down on that. I remember getting, lunch with you at one point. You were like just radically emphasizing all the possibilities. And you're like, I need to be involved. I don't care what I got to do. If I've got to clean toilets, whatever else, get me in the door.
Yep.
No, it was a good time.
Yeah, that was my conversation with who is today my boss. When I was talking about, hey, I just want to keep up with this. And jokingly, I said to him, you need me to help mop the floor? And one of the very first things I did when I worked for Torc was actually mop the floor.
I remember that.
we tracked mud in on one of the trucks into the very pristine garages, and I had the opportunity to mop the floor, which I was proud to do.
That's fair.
Well, Walter, I think we're running into the edge of our time limit here for the episode. But thank you for coming on today and chatting with us and teaching us about kind of the business side of it. I know kind of Adam and I are both on the engineering side and kind of in the nitty gritty details. We've had people on here to talk about organizational design, and we've talked about systems and engineering, but kind of connecting with the business side of things and understanding why there's even a need for this technology and what this technology can affect. A fantastic conversation. Thank you.
And it's a privilege to be a small part of the whole thing, to get to work with you guys, your teams. I pinch myself every day to get to be a small part of this.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think we feel the same. It's a lot of fun.
We do. I'm very privileged. Wow, I can't talk anymore. Very privileged to do what I do. Well,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Yeah, thanks, Walter.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
And this has been Trucking Forward with Tim and Adam. We appreciate you listening. Please subscribe to us where you listen to your podcast, or you can look for us on torc.ai. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
Yeah, there, it got better.